Good evening. Welcome to Inside Out. I'm Pat Smith, and this is where we take you inside state, local, and federal government to bring information out to you. Helping me do that tonight is our police chief here in Montgomery County, Chief Tom Manger. Chief, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be here again.
One reason I wanted you to get back in, and I know you've been talking throughout the county with groups and spreading the word, but is dealing with this opioid crisis. I know it's worldwide, pretty much, but we've got a bad problem here in Montgomery County with overdoses, right?
We do, and you're right. It is a problem all over the world, certainly all over the United States. Last year, in 2017, 74,000 people died of drug overdoses in the United States. And this is more than than people who were killed by homicides, more than people who died in fatal car crashes. I mean, this is an astounding number of deaths, and it really should bring it into perspective for our nation, our lawmakers, everybody, that this is in fact a national crisis. And you're right, Montgomery County is no exception. Last year we had 70 fatal overdoses. We had over 200 overdoses. 70 of them were fatal. And again, this is 70 people in Montgomery County that died of an opioid overdose. It's more than people who were killed in car crashes, more than homicides. So again, you put it in the perspective. I mean, we pay attention to the car crashes and homicides, and yet they're all dwarfed by the number of opioid overdoses that we're having here in the county. So clearly, it's a significant issue for all of us.
Wow. What is the value? We're trying to see what could be done, and I know the Attorney General, Brian Frost, has filed suits against opioid manufacturers. What is that angle?
Well, that's one of a number of strategies, and I think that when you look at this crisis, you have two people that are really that make this crisis. You have the addicts who are unfortunately, chasing after this high every day, and you have the folks that are supplying the drug. And some of these, and some of the folks who get addicted to these painkillers and these opioids do get it originally as a prescription for, for a legitimate issue, a medical issue. And then, unfortunately, they're not able to, they get addicted and they're not able to get off the drug. But there are some folks that are just chasing a better high, and so we need to look at not only the addicts who we in law enforcement see as victims in this, not criminals. We look at them as victims, and we should talk about that a little bit. But but we also look at the suppliers, and you have some legitimate suppliers, and you have some irresponsible suppliers, and you have some criminal suppliers. And so you've got to adopt strategies that address all of those things.
And some of the kids that get it, they get a prescription legitimately for an injury, and then they can't get off it, so they shop another doctor, going to complain about the same injury. So that doctor examines them, feels as though, yeah, you are legitimately in pain.
Right.
And then they get another prescription from him.
Right. And
her.
Right. And so this is, this is the responsibility of the doctors to make sure that they're dealing, that they can try to identify those folks that are sort of shopping around to to continue to get that prescription. But you also have, and we've had criminal investigations involving doctors and suppliers that know that they're just peddling this drug to addicts. And it's interesting. There was a case in Virginia that where a doctor had basically rented a small office, not much more than a room, in a building, and his patients would come in. There was no medical equipment there or anything. He'd come in, he'd talk to them, and then write them a prescription, and then charge them, $400 or $500 for that visit. And of course, this doctor's making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just peddling these prescriptions. So you've got cases like that are obviously need to be dealt with criminally, but you also have to be aware that that the folks that are addicted to these painkillers, and it's interesting, in the 40 years I've been a police officer, I've talked to a lot of folks that have been addicted to drugs, and one of the things I've learned is these addicts use these drugs for two reasons: to feel good and to feel better. And so, I mean, that's the bottom line. And so I understand, and we certainly in law enforcement now understand that incarceration for someone whose problem is addiction, incarceration does them no good. They need treatment. And so we've got things in place, programs in place that offer that treatment immediately when we respond to these overdoses, because that's what those folks need. On the other side, though, you do have the suppliers, and especially those that are involved in criminal activity, supplying that drug. That's where law enforcement really needs to focus its efforts.
And where do you find that the street dealers are getting their supplies?
Well,
if they're pharmaceutical produced.
If you talk to the folks at the Drug Enforcement Administration and talk to our federal partners, they'll tell you that a lot of this drug is being manufactured in China. They will talk about the availability on the dark web, and I couldn't begin to explain what the dark web is or how, but I know. I mean, I got detectives that are very familiar with that and know how to conduct those criminal investigations. But it's very available on the dark web, to people who want to get it. But you have these. So a lot of it's coming from overseas. But again, it doesn't seem to be very difficult for folks that are trying to, that are looking for it to be able to get it. Whether it's fentanyl, whether it's heroin, these drugs are available. In the state of Maryland, it's still Baltimore, sort of the central hub for where a lot of the suppliers are sort of dealing out of. Folks in Montgomery County, it's not unusual for them to travel to Baltimore to buy the drugs, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, or in Baltimore, it would be someplace else. Yeah. Go downtown. Let's talk about fentanyl a little bit. I mean, that is so dangerous that I've heard of police officers getting sick just from inhaling fumes from it or whatever.
Yeah, we've had to. It's mostly they'll get it on their skin, and then they'll touch their face or something, and then they'll start to feel the effects of it. We've actually had a couple of cases in Montgomery County where that occurred, and because we've put our officers through training, and because we've explained to them how they need to handle it, and given them the gloves and that sort of thing, to protective equipment. Those cases that we've had were very quickly identified, and so we were able to give the officer the help that they needed. But it's a dangerous thing for police officers all over the country when responding to these overdoses. And you get to you get to a scene where you've got someone who's overdosed, and oftentimes the folks that are there are not as helpful as you would like them to be in terms of forthcoming with information, and I get that. I mean, they're worried about well, gosh, the police are here, and I don't want to get in trouble. But with the passage of Good Samaritan laws and our approach again, that we go there looking at that individual who's overdosed as a victim who needs treatment. My hope is that more and more folks are realizing that we're there to help. And whether it's our officers and firefighters as well administering the Narcan, and Pat, that Narcan is just it's a life-saving drug that has has been used more and more, not only all over the country, but certainly in Montgomery County. We have trained and issued more and more of our police officers with the naloxone, the drug that counteracts the impact of fentanyl and these opioids. And it has saved so many lives. And our cops. It's a nasal spray that our cops administer, and it just brings people back. Now they're not happy about being brought back because it takes them out of their high. So sometimes you can have a volatile situation when you do it, but the person's life is saved. You're with 70 fatal overdoses, you never know which
Right.
one's going to be fatal and which one isn't. So, we treat them all very seriously. And one of the things that I think is important for viewers to hear about is our response to these overdoses. The police very often will go with a social worker. A social worker goes with us on the initial response. And when we're able to bring this person out of their overdose, we're there to help to get them started with treatment immediately. And that's really, I think, key to some of the success we've had in Montgomery County. It's called the STEER program, and it keeps people out of the criminal justice system and gets them into treatment. If we need to use the leverage of say, hey, we got a police officer here, we got a social worker here, who would you like to go with now?
Yeah.
We'll use whatever leverage we can to get folks into that treatment. And the good news is that the people, the social worker that has gone out with has been very successful, not only in getting most of these folks in treatment, but we check a month later and see where are they? Did they stick with it?
Right.
And the majority of folks actually are sticking with the treatment. So we really feel like this program is helping a lot of folks. But I got to tell you, you look at the number of overdoses we had in 2015, 2016, 2017, and look at what we've had year to date. I mean, we've had 33 people in 2018. So far this year, 33 people have died of opioid overdoses. So it's still a problem. And even though I think we're making a lot of headway with the treatment, there's still an education piece and a public awareness piece that is tremendously important because there's still these overdoses aren't abating. They're still they've tripled from 2010 and they're still on the increase. It's slowed down a little bit, but it's still way too high.
It's incredible, and that's why we have you here to get this word out. When you speak of education, are there programs in the schools that talk about these issues with kids?
Not as many as I would like there to be. I mean, there used to be, used to have programs in the schools, DARE and a couple other formalized programs that aren't used as much anymore, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think that the school system and our community as a whole need to look at this as the crisis that it is. This is not just a few people here and there that are dealing with drug addiction. This is the number of deaths, the number of overdoses is overwhelming, and it is higher than it's been in at any time in our history. And so we have to take this seriously. And so I think that putting those education programs in the schools is worthwhile. We're talking about saving lives now. I'll have to give a plug or shout out to the Montgomery County Police Foundation. It's a nonprofit that helps the police department do a number of things, programs with the community, and they have purchased additional doses of naloxone, the Narcan, purchased additional equipment for the police officers so that we have outfitted more police officers with that. They also are very helpful in helping us get the word out about this opioid crisis and talking to folks about what families and friends can do if they know that someone that they care about is addicted.
Yeah. I think it would be relatively inexpensive to do if you just had a video of, say, such as the programs you've done with John McCarthy, the state's attorney, just a video for them to have to watch in a classroom during a homeroom period. I mean, that wouldn't be, they all have the capabilities in each and every classroom. But our time's already up for the first segment. We'll be right back. I'm Pat Smith. You're watching Inside Out.
I'll be right back. Hi. You think you're probably sober?
Yeah.
But you're thinking about taking the back roads home, just in case. If you're probably sober, then why would you do that? Good choice.
Probably okay isn't okay. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
That's a full glass of wine. I'll be chatting you later.
Welcome back. I'm Pat Smith. You're watching Inside Out. With me here tonight is our Police Chief, Tom Manger, and we're exploring the big problem with opioid overdoses here in Montgomery County. Chief, when we were talking about, what is it, the street program?
The STEER program.
STEER
yes.
program. And that's where you go to a scene and you try to get someone into treatment right away after you've brought them back alive with Narcan and stuff like that. What is done to detox them? I mean, don't they have to be going into a residential setting for detox?
Yeah, that's the most effective way to in terms of treatment. Addiction is a medical issue, and it's worse for some people. It's interesting that when you talk about drug addiction in general, and no matter if you're talking about heroin, you're talking about cocaine, fentanyl, even talking about marijuana, and folks will say, oh, well, marijuana is not addictive. Well, for some folks it is, and because there are some folks that just have that character trait, that personality, maybe that gene that makes them susceptible to those kinds of addictions. Mm-hmm. And the studies that have been done, show that there are some folks that just have, that they're more likely to become drug addicted just because.
Sure.
And so the residential treatment that these folks, especially those folks that are going to have a real difficult time working through their addiction, and making the changes in their life that they need to make. And these are changes that when you talk to recovering addicts, that they'll tell you it's a lifetime process.
Right.
That this
right.
is not something where they can spend a few weeks in a facility and come out and say, okay, I'm cured. They have to deal with this struggle every day. And so that's why I think that not only do they need that strong program for the first several weeks to make the changes they need to make, but they need ongoing help to make sure that they don't relapse.
Right. It is a recovery process. It never ends, right? For them and for alcoholics and whatever. What I was getting at is, do we have any residential facilities available to take them to?
There are a few. Health and Human Services and the social workers that go out with us are able to facilitate those kinds of
arrangements.
Yes, and because cops just aren't trained to do that. We don't have the connections to do it, other than our partnership with Health and Human Services and with the social workers that are very thankfully, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that these social workers are embedded in the police department. Mm-hmm. It's not like, they are Health and Human Service workers. They're employed, by Health and Human Services, but they are detailed to the police department and respond out with our officers. I wish we had a lot more. It's a very small program, but it's a very effective program. And so I think that as we move forward and the community and elected officials and start paying more and more attention to the mental health issues that are in our community, the addiction issues that are in our community, maybe we can increase the resources that are available to address these things through treatment versus incarceration. Because I think I don't know that there's anybody that thinks that incarceration is the answer for somebody who's dealing with addiction or somebody that's dealing with mental health.
Right. It's a medical problem, and that's how it needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what they refer to as deflection from the criminal justice system.
Correct.
There's been a lot of discussion everywhere about that. And at least it's happening here in Montgomery County with your leadership and the attitude that you're instructing your officers on the street on how to approach this.
Yeah, I think it's a more enlightened approach by law enforcement around the country. I can't speak for, I mean, there's 18,000 police departments. I can't speak for all of them. But I can tell you that large police departments in areas like this, in large urban areas, I think we've all come to the realization in recent years that there's a better way to deal with these problems. If you want to, even if you talk about, we've I think in previous programs talked about gang issue, and
Right.
I mean, there's better strategies, than just lock them up. Especially when you're talking about young kids that are, getting involved, making bad choices, and whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, you want to try and give kids enough information and enough supervision and enough, I guess, choices available to them that are healthy for them, so that they don't head down the wrong path. Right. And I think with it's probably when you're dealing with drug addiction and addiction in general, that's one of the more challenging things, because again, there's some folks that they're not choosing to do this. It's almost like they're having to fight something inside of them that
Right.
is at work. And so my heart goes out to folks, the families that are dealing with this, that worry about their child, their loved one every day, because they know they have a drug addiction problem. They know that any day could be a day that they relapse.
Right.
And so I think that there will be a lot of support in our community to help these families and through education, through treatment, and to get folks back to a healthier state.
Right. Now let's revisit Narcan, because I was under the impression that the officers had to go out and inject them. And I heard you earlier mention that it's a nasal spray?
That's correct. Yeah, I don't think, I'll speak for myself. I don't think I'd be crazy about having to eject
Right.
someone. I've never had to do that, thankfully, and not sure I'd want to. And that's, the training to give someone an injection is certainly more complicated than, doing a quick nasal spray. And so as we sort of joke a little bit saying it's cop proof, I mean, it's just so simple, anybody
The
can
cop
do it.
can do it, huh?
Yeah, and so they still have to go through training. We still have to buy the Narcan. We still have to keep it in a container that keeps it safe and doesn't, to make sure that doesn't get diluted in any way. And again, I have to thank the Montgomery County Police Foundation for using their funds to supply more and more officers with that Narcan. But it's rare that a day goes by that either a police officer or a firefighter doesn't give somebody Narcan in Montgomery County to bring them out of an overdose. And now naloxone and Narcan has been made available to family members who know that their loved one has a drug addiction problem, that they have it available to them. And I've heard the arguments. Well, gosh, you're just
enabling.
Enabling this addiction. I guess if I have to choose between the possibility that you're enabling this addiction and the probability that this person's life will be saved if someone has Narcan when they overdose, I'm going to pick the latter. That you save the life. I think that there's when I don't think that people are just given the naloxone without also being given information about how their loved one can receive some help, and my hope is certainly that they would do that. That's why I think that when we, the police, respond out to these overdoses, we try to use that leverage to say, look, we don't want to go down the path into the criminal justice system here. Let's go down the path to treatment, and just about everybody chooses the path to treatment, which is really what we want.
We have discussed earlier that everybody knows somebody it has come in touch with somebody who has this addiction problem and a history of overdosing. For our viewers, how can members of families get the Narcan? Do they have to get a prescription from a treating physician, or do they go to the police department for it?
Well, the police department doesn't supply it, but there are they can get in touch with treatment facilities, and they can give them information about how they would be able to get a dose of it to have in case their loved one would overdose. But there are so many agencies that are around to help, and certainly provide information and give guidance to to family members or friends of someone who is addicted. There's they have now everybody wants a slogan, and the Speak Up, Save a Life.
Right.
And there comes a time when if you know somebody's addicted and that you need to speak up to try and save their life, not to get them in trouble, but to get them the treatment that they need to save their life. And you can only just go on the web, and there's a ton of information there about resources and people that can provide help to you.
And you can often bring the horse to water, but whether or not they drink is another issue.
We don't need any more evidence that people are dying every year of this. It's a serious problem, so people do need to speak up and save a life.
That's great. What other strategy do you recommend for viewers to be helpful? That certainly is the best, to speak up and save a life and to move forward in that direction.
Well, I think that helping once their loved one gets into treatment, using their influence to make sure that the individual follows through with the treatment. I mean, so often you'll have people that will go there when they're in the crisis, and then they start to feel a little bit better, and they think, okay, I'm fine. I can just go back, and they can't.
Right.
So I think that parents, loved ones need to educate themselves about addiction so that they know what a struggle it can be for individuals. And because this rehabilitation is a lifelong process, and so they need to understand that, and they need to be in it for the long haul. And again, I don't know of anybody that doesn't know somebody that's not been impacted by this crisis, and more of us, I think more of us need to take this seriously,
Right.
To give it the attention, the funding, and the resources that we need to save more lives.
Very good. It's everyone's problem, not just those people
Absolutely.
over there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chief, thank you very much for coming in. For anyone that would have questions, what is your contact information?
They can
To
go
your
to mymcpnews.com. That is takes you to our website. You can also go to the county's website, click on the police department, and we have all that information there. There's links to a lot of different things that might be of interest to the public.
Great. Again, Chief Manger, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Pleasure having you in here. I'm Pat Smith. You're watching Inside Out. We are here on Channel 16 on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Good night.